Welcome to this first session of the panel interviewing MPs and members and chairs of select committees. We are on our first evidence session covering science and the environment. And I should note again that this is not an official proceeding of Parliament, although it's been broadcast on Parliament TV. You're therefore not protected by parliamentary privilege. I welcome in this session Onwurah, who is chair of the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee, Bill Esterson, who is chair of the Energy, Security and Net Zero Select Committee, and Toby Perkins, who's chair of the Environmental Audit Select Committee. Thank you very much for joining us. We have questions from members of the public to all of you. Our first question comes from Tara Steele, who is a writer and web designer from Burbage.
Hello. Parliament sourced evidence to inform policy around mitigating catastrophic risks from AI. Has the 2024 paper in Science, Managing Extreme AI Risks Amid Rapid Progress, been considered?
Okay, I'm going to put that question to Onwurah. Can I also just add, we had a question also from Carolyn Saunter from Glasgow, who couldn't make it, who wanted to ask whether MPs are educated on the technical aspects of AI. So I don't know if you want to cover that too.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Just let me start by saying how pleased I am to be here. If my voice sounds a little bit strange, it's because I've just had 3 hours of root canal and my lips are still a bit numb. But I think it is a testimony to how important I thought this evidence session was, that I wanted to come straight from that to this, because I do think that the work of Sense About Science and the Evidence Week is really important. And evidence-based policy and evidence-based parliamentary procedures are what we want to support and promote. So it's a fantastic question about the catastrophic risks from AI. One of the things, my background is as a chartered engineer, and I worked in tech for 20 years before coming into Parliament. And I am really aware that my constituents in Newcastle Central and West far too often feel that technology is something that happens to them. You know, it's something that they are subject to, that happens somewhere far away in Silicon Valley or Cambridge, and it's not something that is accountable to them. You know, and that includes AI. And as you know, the representatives of the people here, the role of, I think, all select committees, particularly my select committee, is to demonstrate that the opposite is true, that it's we, the people, who can steer new technology to work in our interests. And this is a good week to ask that question, in as much as the Prime Minister announced the UK AI's Opportunities Action Plan last Monday, which was about making the most of the potential upsides of AI to drive productivity improvements, economic growth, better health care, better public services. And I do think it's really important that we emphasise the opportunities that AI brings. But it's also clear that we need to understand, I think, you know, the question particularly about parliamentarians understanding the risks posed by artificial intelligence, and to take those very seriously, you know, from AI enabling bad human actors to develop chemical or biological weapons, or AI agents somehow becoming sort of misaligned from our own priorities and taking over the world. And in the last Parliament, so an example of the way select committees work, the Science Select Committee held an extensive inquiry into the governance of AI, and that identified 12 challenges, including the existential challenge of the catastrophic potential of AI. And the final report was published before the election, but this government has actually, the Labour government has actually recently responded to it, and I would ask that the report and the response be made available. The committee
I have to thank you there, just so we can move on. Thank you.
Okay.
But actually, we can pick that report up and share it afterwards. Thank you very much indeed. We move to our next question now, which is from Kieran Shaw, who is a new dad from Leamington Spa, and this question is to Bill Esterson.
Thank you. Given the climate and cost of living crises and the ancient housing stock we have in this country, how are planning decisions made when simple energy saving measures such as double glazing and solar panels are rejected on conservation grounds by local councils? does Parliament get a say on when environmental concerns trump historical conservation concerns by local councils?
Well, Kieran, thank you very much for your question, and thank you for being here, and congratulations. I think are very much in order. And as the chair of a select committee, my job is to collect evidence, as we are doing today, and to present recommendations, as indeed all my colleagues are doing on their committees, to government. So these sorts of questions really are questions of what ministers hopefully are going to do. We're all members of the governing party, as well as being chairs of committees. Our job is to provide constructive scrutiny of what government is doing. And there is this trade-off, there is this challenge, as you say in your question, between the desirability of maintaining historic buildings and being honest to the history and heritage behind them, and keeping up with the need to protect the environment. So one of the questions that my committee in its work, and we are there to scrutinise the work of the department. We are there. We've announced some inquiries into supply chains and into workforce and into community energy. And in among those sessions that we hold, we look at areas like planning. Planning is a very significant part of how we address the environmental considerations around the transition to a low carbon future that is very much at the heart of what this government is endeavouring to do in its stated aims, and indeed there is a great deal of consensus across politics in that agenda. So the challenge here is to what extent is it really, really important to protect heritage, which supports people who want to do that, against the potential conflict of for example, upgrading sash windows and moving to double glazing in housing, putting in modern insulation, potentially installing heat pumps rather than older heating methods. And these are very much planning challenges. Something that the new Labour government has done is to change the rules to enable heat pumps to be installed closer to a neighbouring property. It's a slightly different point.
Before we run out of time on this question, could I ask, the question was also about does Parliament have much of a say? And we've only got 20 seconds left on this question. I think that's important for...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where the role of the Select Committee is incredibly important, because we are there to gather evidence, to look at the experts and to make recommendations to government. And that is what my committee will do on this and very much related points on planning, as my colleagues will on their subject matters.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We move now to a question from Tegan Murphy. Question to Toby Perkins, environmental audit.
Hello. My question is, how does Parliament intend to check that water companies maintain and update their water quality monitoring systems? And with this in mind, how are new technologies harnessed to improve the monitoring network?
Sorry, what was the last bit of the question?
With this in mind, how are new technologies harnessed to improve the existing monitoring network?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. The oversight of the water quality regime is an overall responsibility for the Environment Agency, which also issues permits for polluting activities to happen when they're unavoidable. And the role of the Environmental Audit Committee that I chair is to actually hold the regulator to account, so to make sure the Environment Agency are doing their job and ensuring that they are held to account. I think that it may well be the topic of one of those reviews to look at the role of technology. What the Environment Agency will tend to do, and what the government will do, is to set specific standards, and it's then for the Select Committee to sort of hold them to account against those standards. So I think that at this stage I couldn't answer on behalf of the committee about the technology, but we're there really measuring the outputs. I think there has been huge improvement in terms of that monitoring and the quality of information that we've had over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. But what that information has told us is the extent to which our water courses are being polluted, and I think the work of the Select Committee, the predecessor committee, actually brought a lot of that information to bear, and as a result has made the quality of information we've got better, and then has pushed that really up the public agenda. So I think that really has been valuable from the Select Committee.
Are you happy with that, Toby?
Yeah, I suppose I'm happy with
Thank
that.
you. And we'll move to our next question. We have a question from Ben Small, who is a biologist from Liverpool. So I'm guessing your question is going to land with Onwurah, who's the chair of the Science, Innovation and Technology Committee.
Thank you. As the world gets increasingly complex, it often feels like Parliament reacts to issues. Could Parliament make better use of predictive models to prepare for issues or to inform decision making? COVID models would be a good example of success, in my opinion.
Well, thank you very much for that question. And yes, I think the fact is that, MPs can use whatever technologies we want to inform decision makings. And it's very, the case that MPs may be using predictive models to determine what their casework will be or what the future business of Parliament will be. But I think, as you said, COVID is where the government and MPs really were making decisions about life and death using predictive models. And I am not aware of which departments are using predictive models in that same kind of way. I am aware, for example, that AI predictive models, that's a sort of combination of AI and a lot of AI models are effectively predictive models. So the department for the DWP is using machine learning for tackling benefit frauds with a model that flags cases that require further examination. And I asked some questions about that. I had some equalities concerns, some concerns about how that model actually worked. And the department won't publish the equality impact assessment in case it helps fraudsters evade detection. And I think that speaks to one of the issues about using models, and one of the issues that my predecessor committee found in the AI report, which is the black box channel, so that if decision makers are using models but they can't see what's going on within the model, then that can lead to discrimination and other failings, because transparency, and that's part of what our committee is about, needs the ability to see and validate the reasons why decision is made. So I think this government is committed to using AI to both improve public services and also to improve the quality of decision making, and it needs to be transparent how that is being used. There's great power there, but we also need to make sure that people can access it. I also just want to say that I do think MPs can have better support from AI to address issues of administration, etc., and to leave MPs with more time to actually deal with casework and policy development. And that's the same, AI can have that influence on many different aspects or sectors of the economy, and Parliament shouldn't be slower to take it up than the rest of the economy.
Thank you. Ben, it seems that Parliament mirrors your optimism on this subject.
Thank you very much for your answer.
We move now to a question from Michael McGeehan, who is an engineer from Belfast. Michael, before I take your question, I want to also flag a question that came in on a similar theme, which was from Josie Cohen in Brighton, was asking, is Parliament looking at the evidence behind the decision to continue allowing the unnecessary use of highly hazardous pesticides by local authorities in public spaces? So I think there's a lot of questions that came in about the environment. I wanted to include that question if there's time to reach that. But Michael McGeehan, let's have your question.
How does Parliament assess the government's investments for climate change? Electric vehicles are pushed out, then heat pumps pushed back, solar and insulation grants are scrapped. Basically every green energy option is nuked after they come out. How are you assessing this? Is there some evidence that you see that's showing something that we didn't know about?
I think this question is for you, Toby Perkins.
Thank you. It's kind of an area that both myself and Bill's committee is looking at. The Environmental Audit Committee has a unique role. It doesn't shadow a particular department, but basically looks right across government at the contribution towards the government's environmental targets of each of the individual departments. On the green energy policy, the government often doesn't reveal more than it has to about its investment strategy, citing sort of commercial considerations. There are opportunities for different elements within Parliament to question government, but really it's detailed work that's done by select committees that gets down deep into the performance of these different kinds of technologies that are coming forward. And so there is currently a lot of work, I think particularly the Bills Committee is doing on the government's performance on energy policy particularly, and the extent to which these are going to be reflected in actually improving our environmental performance. I don't know if you want to say more about the work your committee's doing, Bill?
Well, certainly, and we are taking evidence from the department. We had the Secretary of State, Ed Miliband, just last Wednesday, and he is very confident that the country can make enormous progress towards being self-sufficient in the generation of clean power by 2030, or 95% clean power by 2030, on the road to net zero by 2050. That's what he said to us. But really, really important that, to your point, that there is certainty, that we don't have constant changes of policy, which we've seen rather too much of over recent years. And I think that's something that the Secretary of State, the Department, and indeed the Government, I think, are very much set on.
Mr. Brown, sorry, I'm conscious that we respond to your second question.
Yeah.
Yes,
please.
Want to go back first, or?
No, please do go ahead.
Just so very briefly on the pesticides, I mean, this is something that is being debated in Parliament. Government recently made announcements on the neonicotinoids, which brought forward policy which was being looked at in the last Parliament. But in terms of it by the use by local authorities, I'm not conscious of that being a current area of review. Many of the different select committees will periodically go out to stakeholders and invite them to contribute ideas for future inquiries. And I would encourage your contributor to make sure that both my committee and the Department for Local Government Committees consider whether this might be something they want to look at in the future.
Right. And actually on that note, I think it might be a good moment to point out that committees do, in general, your committee also, Onwurah, in general solicits input from the public about issues that they should be looking at.
Last week we launched our Under the Microscope call for us proposals as to what the committee should look at, and if you go onto our website, the Select Committee website, you'll find a link to making a proposal to submit for an inquiry for the committee.
Yeah, thank you. Life, are you happy with your response? Worried?
Yeah.
Worried.
There wasn't really an answer as to an explanation as to why things are being scrapped all the time. They can give me an answer to that.
Is that something that perhaps parliamentarians
Sorry,
could...
what
about
was it you
why
felt
things
hadn't been
get
answered?
scrapped? Why do initiatives get scrapped without enough explanation to the public about was it because the money ran out or the thing didn't work?
Yes. I mean, well, whether there's enough explanation, I mean, the government announces its policies. It will usually, when it is changing the policy on things like the feed-in tariffs we saw back in 2010, there will be a number of questions, a number of opportunities. It might be a statement that the government makes where they get asked questions about it. It might be that in the monthly ministerial questions that they will get asked about it. Now, sometimes people might not necessarily see all of those, so the public might feel like those changes have happened and haven't really seen it being discussed. But there are sort of, I think, reasonable opportunities for us too. But if you think about a particular department, like for example the Department for Energy and Net Zero, they will answer questions on their entire portfolio for 1 hour once every kind of 5 or 6 weeks, and they've got a huge breadth of things to be debated. So it is the case that sometimes there won't be as much focus on that as there should be, and that just sort of, I think, covers the breadth of information. Each government would probably say, we think we gave enough detail, but I appreciate looking at it from the outside. You might say, this is an area of real interest to me, and I feel it's not been covered in enough detail.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We have a question from Isabel Cameron, who is from Dundee.
So nuclear power has significant environmental impacts, including processes associated with uranium, high water usage, and, as is planned with the Sizewell C plant, degradation of valuable carbon storing marshlands. How does Parliament compare the benefits and risks with other renewable energy sources such as oceanic power for reaching net zero 2050?
Well, I think I'll answer it, isn't it?
I think it is for you.
Yeah, Isabel, thanks for your question. And the government, I mean, again, I'm chairing the committee. I'm scrutinising the government, but I think what they would say and what they have said publicly, both in the run-up to the election and since the election, is that there are a range of technologies which are going to be needed to decarbonise the generation and supply of energy, and they are particularly focused on electrifying power supply, moving away from gas, and to do that the dominant sources are going to be offshore wind and onshore wind in much greater quantities than we have now, solar as well. But there is a smaller portion of the electricity generation that will need to come from, in particular, nuclear over a period of time. They've extended the life of some of the existing nuclear power plants, and you mentioned Sizewell C. Hinkley C is under construction. Sizewell C is likely to get the final go-ahead in the coming months, and the reason for the need for nuclear power is it is very difficult to see how we get to clean power without it. There are other technologies like tidal energy, and which I think you were alluding to there. And we have the generation of hydrogen with excess wind and solar energy, and indeed with other electricity generation, which can be used as a backup. But the government's view is, or the view that they've expressed to my committee, that this is how we will achieve the objective of decarbonisation and giving ourselves a chance in the future. And it's alongside encouraging people to be able to switch to electric vehicles and to heat pumps in the home. And when it comes to heat pumps, at the moment 80% of people use gas central heating to heat the home. To move away from that, we need these very, very large amounts of electricity. And the Committee on Climate Change, which is the statutory body which advises government, their estimate is that 52% of us will have heat pumps, 42% of us will rely on heat networks, 5% hydrogen boilers, and 1% direct electric heating by 2050. To get to that point will require the kind of changes that you alluded to and that the government is saying it intends to deliver.
Thank you very much. That brings us towards the end of this session. I did want to flag briefly a question that we didn't have time for, which is about the evidence for onshore wind farms. And that question was from David Barron, St Breward, who asked, is this evidence-based decision, or is there another factor? And I think actually could sum up a lot of the questions that we've had are about transparency, about the trade-offs that are being made. There was definitely a strong theme of that in this panel. Thank you very much for joining us and for asking those questions. That brings to the end of our Science and Environment session. Thank you. Order.